Okay, so it's recording now. So again, you
Okay.
just start out with the first one, and then the date, time, location, the circumstances, what happened, and
Okay.
then I'll ask you questions about that one. Then we'll go to the second one.
Okay. Well, to start off, my name's Colton. I'm from Ohio County, Kentucky. I was probably about 17. This was around 2016. The exact day, I don't remember. It was in the middle of the summer. I do remember that. It took place on Railroad Bed Road. My first experience did. And it was probably around 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And me and my ex-wife had turned off of 54 onto Railroad Bed Road, and we noticed there was a bunch of dead turtles in the middle of the road that had been flipped upside down. And these were big snapping turtles. They weren't box turtles. There was at least 15 to 20 of them that I can recall, all in the middle of the road. And she stopped, or she told me to stop because I was driving, and she said, what's going on? I've never seen something like this before. I don't know any animals that can do this, because they had all been crushed and eaten almost. There was nothing left of them but the shells that were crushed, and it looked like something was using force to do it. So we keep going, and she told me to go because she started to get scared, and it was freaking me out, to be honest. So we kept going, and about, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the mile down the road, and the turtles were right past the park there on Railroad Bed Road, maybe less than a quarter of a mile. And then we went about another quarter of a mile, closer to half a mile down. And on the opposite side of the road, I was driving, and the creek would have been on my left. So on the creek side of the road, I see a hand holding onto this tree, and it's a gigantic hand. I mean, it's a huge, massive, just black hand. And I was like, that's kind of odd. It sticks out because everything else was a different colors, and this was just shiny black fur. So I thought maybe it was a bear at first, until I noticed that it had fingers, and you could see that it had a hand holding on to this tree. And the height of where this hand was placed, it was maybe 13 feet, 12, in between 12 to 14 feet on top of this tree. And as I noticed this hand, I'm staring at it, and then I couldn't believe my eyes whenever it slowly peeked out from behind the tree and just kind of looked at my truck for a minute, and then got scared and was still holding on to the tree. And when it peeked its head out the first time, I could tell that it had a coned head. It had shiny black fur. It was thick black fur, and the top of the head had to have been at least 10 feet up in the air. And it peeked at me twice, and it was looking at my truck as I'm coming towards it. And I guess as I got closer, it realized I was getting closer to it. And the second time, it stayed there for a little bit longer than the first time. And you could just tell. I mean, I couldn't see any defining facial features or any features of it, on its face, like nose, eyes. I couldn't really tell because it was so black. It was hard to really, distinguish different features of it. But you could totally tell that it was humanoid. It was bipedal. It was definitely holding on to this tree to lean out, and it was curious. It was watching my vehicle, and it realized that I got closer, and when it did, it dropped its hand and disappeared into the wood line. So I speed up to try to, me being a curious guy, and I've always heard stories about this. I sped up and stopped, and I stopped exactly where I thought I had seen the thing, and I didn't hear anything. There were no leaves rustling. There was no branches breaking. And it was just odd. It was odd seeing those turtles there, because I don't even think bears would be capable of doing that. And some of these turtles, They get big here, but they're usually laying on logs or they're actually in the water. So bears, you would think they usually don't go in the water to hunt, especially black bears.
Right.
And that was the first experience. That was probably in May or June of 2017. I can't remember the exact day. It's been so long since I've had that experience happen to me. Now, do you want me to move on to the second one?
Well, let me ask you a few questions. First,
Okay.
the first question, um, what was the lighting? What time of day was it? What was the
It was
lighting like?
midday,
Was
bright
it
as
dark?
day.
Was it rainy?
No, it was clear. No, not a cloud in sight. It was midday.
Okay.
The sun was shiny. It was probably, like I said, it was probably about, the sun hadn't even went down. It wasn't even getting dark yet. It wasn't, but maybe 4 o'clock right on the dot.
Okay. And do you remember about how fast you were driving?
As soon as I got to the turtles, I slowed down substantially because it was kind of odd to see that. Um, as I kept going, when I was going, I don't know, maybe you can't really drive fast on these roads, so I wasn't doing any more than 40 or 45,
Yeah.
and I had time to look at this and really kind of, what is that? And then I realized my brain didn't want to tell me, it knew. It was like, I know what I'm looking at, but am I really looking at that right now?
Yeah. Um, you were driving. Was it on
Yeah.
your side of the road or the opposite side?
So it would have been I was going back towards Dundee area, which is the cut through there, that road straight through to Narrows. And it was on the creek side because the creek runs parallel to that road for a little while. And it was on the creek side. So it would have been on the opposite side of the road.
Okay. And when you got up to it, how close were you to it, would you say?
When it first peaked out, I was maybe a quarter of a mile exactly, maybe a little more than that. And by the time that I got, I don't know, I want to say in between 200 yards, maybe it disappeared.
Right. And you know what people don't realize, you're saying this is about 10 foot, which
Yeah.
we've got a report out there from some arrowhead hunters who report seeing one over 10 feet out there, which is
Yeah.
not, it's not on record officially. But again, if it's a bright sunny day, quarter mile is not far.
Oh,
And
I
this is
knew what it
black.
was. It was clear as day. There was
Yeah.
no
I mean,
denying it.
yeah, you can see something that big. People don't realize it's massive. Its hands are massive. The head
Yeah.
is massive. So
And it
you
wasn't
could see
claws. That's what made me wonder and question at first, because I thought it was possibly a bear. But you could see the fingers. You could see the shape of a hand. It was humanoid hand, like an ape's hand.
right. Um, okay, so that one was black,
Yep.
massive in size, sunny day. When was your second one?
My second one was actually in either 2020 or 21. I didn't keep track of the dates because, man, I was just so in shock. And I know the second one was closer to fall. It was still summertime. It was right at the end of summertime, around fall. Um, it was during the nighttime, which it still was clear as day to me because I was so much closer to this thing than what I was my first time that it happened. And my ex-wife thought I was crazy at first until we had the reassurance of the news story that broke the next morning about the farm animals getting ripped to pieces. So that night, I was actually in my recliner, and me and my ex-wife, my wife at the time, we had decided to get new curtains and blinds for our house. So we took all of them down. All the windows were exposed. And you know how, if you have exposed windows anyways, you're a little bit on edge and think somebody's outside looking in at you or whatever it may be. Um, So that was about 2 or 3 days prior that we took the blinds and curtains down. And that one night I was sitting there in my recliner, and I'll never forget this. My dogs started whining. They were acting scared, like something big was around, like they could sense it. I could tell something wasn't right. It wasn't right. And I went to go to let them out, and in the top corner of one of my living room windows, it was clear as day. I could see this orange outline. It looked like an orangish, brown, reddish color. And then I started looking and really staring, and I could see the blacks. It was like an orangutan, because I Googled orangutan pictures after this incident. And that's exactly what it looked like, just more humanoid in a way. I don't know how to explain that. It was more of this one I could really see the facial features. The lips were like flat almost. The nose was more flat too, but it was wider. It was really, really wide nose, and it just had massive eyes. The eyes were almost as big as baseballs at least. And I'm looking at this thing, and my brain starts short circuiting again. And I realized what I'm looking at, and we locked eyes. I mean, we stared into each other's eyes for a good couple of seconds. And it knew that I was looking at it. It could read the emotions on my face because I was terrified. I didn't know how to react. I was frozen in fear because he saw me and I saw it. So he knew that he was spotted. And he took off. I didn't hear any noise, but the way that he was looking in my window, if I can get a picture for a reference, I'll try to send it to you. But this top corner of the window, it was leaning on the top of my roof of a modular home. So however big that thing was, it was looking down at an angle at me like this in the window. And it had to have been 13 feet tall, at least, or more. I mean, it was massive. But the best way I could describe it is the fur was like, it was like an orangish red brown kind of exactly like an orangutan. As crazy as it sounds, it was 100% a huge. It was like an orangutan's cousin or brother, just way bigger.
Yeah, but I think I told you this. There's lots of sightings on that road in Ohio County, near Fordsville, near Dundee. I've got many, many, many documented sightings, and some of them they're large.
Yeah.
They're big, like 10 footers. So I'm thrilled that you have come forward to share this because it adds more credibility to these other witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It validates the other sightings. I've had my own experiences out there. I've been out there. I've got a game camera photo, which was put online.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the gentleman.
Yep.
Yes, the guy on the same road. I'm going to add it in this video so people can see it. He has passed away now, unfortunately. And he had 5 pictures on his game camera. And I begged him, can you share the SD card and we can analyze them?
Concrete.
He would not. He was private. He didn't want trespassers. He didn't want the media. He didn't want to be harassed. He didn't want to be made fun of. So he kind of took those to his grave. One picture got online. His own family member took a cell phone picture of it from his TV, put it online. I grabbed it. Anything else? Anything else you want to add?
And the other thing, the other thing about that second one, the other thing that reassured me was the fact that we had news crews in Olayton the very next day, because I told my wife about the experience, and she thought I was a lunatic. I thought I was a lunatic at first, and it was awful strange how it was awfully strange how the very next morning they're breaking a news story about this farm directly down the road from the house that I was living in on Layton, which is about 5-10 miles from Dundee and Rosine and Fordsville. Um, this whole entire farm apparently had been slaughtered by dogs, according to the authorities and the news. And I'm sitting there thinking, no BS, man. There's no way that I know what I saw, and it was real, and I know I didn't just imagine that and then imagine that the animals also were ripped to pieces. That's but both the turtles and those animals being coinciding with the sighting of that nature is just it's undeniable for me anyways, because now I will never not believe, and I know they're out there.
You mentioned before one of the animals which were killed was a donkey.
Apparently, I don't know for sure. They never confirmed it though. They really were vague on the news. They were vague. The people that went through it were really vague about it. But it did break the news, and then it seemed like as soon as it broke, it was gone. They didn't press that story, and they never really put out any type of evidence, any type of pictures of trail cams for dogs or anything like that. Which I would love to see. If they had them, I would love to see them just to disprove me. But I've never seen that.
Right. I'll do some research and
if you
try
can
to dig
find
up
out, definitely.
the article. Did you mention something about black SUVs showed up?
Man, and yeah, I had seen law enforcement. I was seeing game wardens, police from the county. It was county and state police both. The animal control officer we have here in the county at the time, I'm not sure if he still does that or not. We were seeing it was pretty suspicious vehicles, like government vehicles almost. And there were for about, I don't know, maybe that next whole week after that incident, and after the farm had been attacked and all their animals were killed. It was about a week at least. They were running the roads because I could sit on my porch and watch the traffic go by, and I would see them go by, and I'm like, now why do they need the state police and the game wardens and the county cops? Why do they need all of them for just a couple of dogs? That's fishy.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
I've taken reports where animals were killed and there was no sign of trauma. For example,
right.
I remember this case in southern Kentucky. They had some large dogs. One was I think it was maybe a mastiff, but anyway, or it could have been a husky.
Right.
Anyway, there's no sign of trauma. Almost like something picked it up and threw it down. It had blunt force trauma, like there's no scratches.
Slinging it against the ground.
Right. And that dog was trying to protect the livestock, and something killed that big dog, and there's no signs of trauma to that dog.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that should be raise your eyebrows right there. Like, that's a little strange, because I don't know any type of natural predator. We do have big cats here. We also get the occasional mountain lion or a abnormally large bobcat. But as far as bears being really prevalent, they come here every so often. They're not as prevalent here in Kentucky or even in the county as you would think. But they're not. I mean, if you hear a bear come in the county, they know about it and they're posting it on the news.
Yeah, they do.
And there was nothing like that in the area at the time that I was aware of. And just the sighting, and because man, I was literally less than 4 feet away from this thing, looking at it through a window. Like, I couldn't deny that, and then I hear about the farm getting ripped to pieces, and I'm like, oh my God, my ex-wife, she was like, I don't think you're very crazy now, because that kind of confirms what you saw. And I was like, yeah. It made me even more terrified after I had heard the news about the farm animals, because it reassured me.
What happened the night you saw it looking in the window? What did you do immediately after?
Immediately after, I went to go let my dogs out. And after I let them out, they actually ran around to the window that it was standing at. It would have been standing at, and they stopped at the bottom of the stairs, because it was right, I don't know, maybe 2 feet away from a set of stairs going up to the other side of our porch. And they stopped. They froze, and they just looked in the woods. I stopped, and I was just listening, trying to hear if anything was out there, trying to see anything. It terrified me, and I could smell, like, it wasn't pungent, and it wasn't really, really overpowering, I guess you could say, but there was a slight like skunky smell. It was swampy, skunky smelling, almost like when you go to a farm or you smell a wet donkey or a wet cow or something like that, and they just get real wet, and it don't smell quite like a wet dog. It's a little worse, and a little bit, it strikes the nose a little bit more.
Right.
That smell was lingering in the air for sure.
Okay. So when you came outside, it had already
had bolted. Yeah.
Left the area.
Yep.
You mentioned on your first report along that road, there's a BFRO report. I believe it's that same road, kind of going to that. I told you about that graveyard that's back there.
Yeah.
There's a little bridge before you get to the road to the graveyard, and someone saw one standing in the creek, and they had driven up right next to it. And they looked over, and the creature was standing in the creek. That's on the BFRO's website. I've got a good friend, Don. When he was a young man, I told you, he went out in his backyard to get a windshield wiper motor out of an old car.
Yeah. And, yeah. You mentioned that. Yeah, you did.
And he climbed in the engine compartment to get the motor out, and his dog alerted to something, and he looked over. He saw a young Bigfoot watching him, and he said his dog beat him home.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all, man. And you come out here long enough, and you sit out in these woods, you hear certain things like deer and rabbit and squirrels running through the woods. And then there's certain times where I've questioned if that there was a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Gigantopithecus, whatever you want to call them, running through the woods when you go outside. There's times where I feel like they watch us a lot more around these areas than what we realize, because they're so sneaky. If I hadn't have looked in that window, I would have never known that it was there.
Yeah, they're highly intelligent.
It knew that I was scared just based on looking in its eyes, because at first he was just watching me, observing me. I know he was. He had to have been for at least a couple of seconds or minutes even. And, I'm sitting there, and when I look up, when we locked eyes, it was almost like we connected in a way. I don't know how to explain that, but he knew. He felt my fear, and I felt his, in a way, I guess you could say, because we were scared of each other. It scared him because he was so self-aware and smart to know that I had seen it.
Right.
He knew a living creature had seen him, let alone a human.
Yes. I've had that happen with a coyote, of all things. I was hiking in a creek daytime. We had thick embankments, a lot of tree cover. It was very thick, and I'm walking, and then I stop, and I don't remember thinking something's watching me. I just remember looking way up on the hillside through the trees. In a little opening was a coyote looking right at me.
Yeah.
And I looked right up at it, and when we locked eyes, it made eye contact, and it took off.
Right. And see, that's kind of what happened. And it was so strange, man, because when you look in something's eyes, you can tell that it's a living thing. It's not just a man in a suit. It's not some type of elaborate hoax just to freak somebody out. You could tell that. You could see the wetness of his eyes. You could see the wrinkles around his eyes. Once I started to stare at him, I could see the detail of his face almost. And, you know, the dark parts of his face, because it was exactly like an orangutan, a big, round, black-skinned face. And then the hair, the best way I could remember it and describe it is it was almost like parted in the middle in a way, kind of. It was parted in the middle, and it was thick and bushy and kind of like went back toward, it looked like it had been, grown backwards like this. But it didn't look like the first one as much, because it makes me wonder if it was maybe a female or a really aggressive female or aggressive male even, because I'm not sure how they distinguish with the coned heads, because the first one definitely had a coned head. This one didn't seem like it did. It had more of a rounded head.
Right. The eyes on the second one, can you describe the eyes more?
They were huge, and it was like they didn't protrude, like it wasn't like a human's eyes where your eyeballs are a little sunken in your skull. They were more bugged. They were big. They were huge. Like it was, you could almost see the roundness of the eyeball when it had its lid. Because I watched it blink before I got up and it had taken off. But I watched it blink, and you could see like the best way I could describe it is like you could see the roundness of how big these eyeballs were when it blinked. You could see the lid was a lot bigger, and it was more like, I don't even know how to say it. He just looked like one of those creatures from Mars Attacks anyway, in a way, but not quite that like on that scale, but probably that size and close to. It was dark. His eyes were really dark. I don't know if they had a color to them. I couldn't really tell, but I could definitely tell that the center of the eye, you could barely see the white because it was just all black, and there was a little white line around his eyes, almost like he was, Yeah.
But
very strange, very strange.
Most people claim the eyes are, all one color, like all black.
Yeah, that's basically what they were.
Right. If they shine, they have lots of different eye shine, like red, whitish blue, green. I mean, you get all kinds. But the eye shine, to me, is more of a reflection of what the light source is.
Right. A man-made light. Yeah.
Right.
Reflecting the corneas and your retinas of your eyes.
Yeah. So, but solid and very little white. Most people say they don't see the white. It's like solid black, giant, which I believe is the reason why they can see at night. They can let in a lot of light.
Yeah.
They got a huge pupil, if you will, and they can see better at night.
I'm not going out in the woods on a full moon night here in Kentucky, Ohio County, Kentucky. I'll tell you that right now. We just had one, and we just had the blue supermoon the other night, and I was just sitting there thinking to myself, I would not get paid any amount of money to go out there by myself, knowing what I've seen and experienced.
Yeah, I've been out there on an investigation miles back behind the gentleman that had the 5 game camera pictures, and I recorded some really good yells, which were not coyote, and I will add those yells right here in this video so people can hear. You can hear the vocals I recorded, and then the coyotes went berserk. This was not the alpha coyote.
Right. You could tell the difference.
You could tell the alpha. This had a human-like tone to it.
Wow.
But we were remote. There's nobody for miles near us. We had some tree knocks, so we heard the tree knocks, and then I picked up these great yells, which like I said, I'll add right here in this video.
And you know how secluded it is here, you know, and these areas are just so, I mean, there's so much abundance of game and deer, rabbit, squirrel, and it wouldn't take them anything to find a trail for these the game a game trail for like deer and live happily.
There's land out there. I tell people it's like a land that time had forgotten, that we never developed. There are a lot of hollers and hills and remote area. You get back in there, you can get turned around really
absolutely
easy. It's pretty creepy back in those areas of Ohio County and the surrounding counties.
And you know, I never truly believed. I was even skeptical after my first experience, but before I had the second experience, you know, I sat there and thought about it, and I'm like, man, you know, I researched, and then I found you guys, and I'm like sitting there, like, oh my goodness, you know. And I knew about y'all at the time of my second experience because I had followed you on Facebook, and I was going to reach out, but you understand the ridicule that people get, and the things that people say, or they treat you the way they do, and they've never experienced anything. And quite honestly, I consider myself very, very fortunate and very lucky to have had those experiences, because nobody else around here, you know, that I know personally has.
I agree. You're lucky. A lot of people want to see one. I want to see one, and the skeptics,
let alone twice. I saw one twice.
And that's good though. You're in a hot area. And people, the skeptics out there are going to say, oh, you saw one twice. Okay, he lives in an area where there's dozens of credible sightings. There's game camera photos. There's vocals. There's 2 duck hunters in Dundee saw Bigfoot. That's documented about the duck hunters seeing one. There's so many reports. I can't even go into all the reports in that area. But you will, just so you know, we'll share this video on our YouTube, on social media. And my wife watches it. I watch it. You will get trolls that are
for sure.
Closed-minded jerks.
No. Well, and you know, that's the thing. I actually like people hearing my story that are like that, because, you know, what have I got to lie about or lose? I have nothing to lose or gain from this. It was something that happened to me that I'll never forget, and it changed my whole perception on things, because I was told. Now, I was a believer in, you know, spiritualism, ghosts, and things of that nature before this, but never before was I a cryptozoology person. I never got into that as much as a lot of other people. And then when I had that first experience, it just really kind of opened my mind to it, and, you know, got me wondering, like, what if, you know, who are we to say that we're the only species that's an apex around here?
Right. Yeah. There's too many credible sightings from people. There's law enforcement. I've taken reports from park rangers who've seen them, teachers, lawyers, doctors who've seen them. And I've done this for 3 decades. I interview the people. Sometimes I meet them in person. If I vouch for it, I'll add it to my website. At any time, if I think a report is bogus in the slightest way, I won't admit it to my website. I won't document it.
Right.
If I find out later that they were joking, I immediately remove it. I just did it recently. Someone recorded one here in the Red River Gorge. He thought it was funny. I found out about it, and I immediately removed it. I don't tolerate that stuff, and I stand behind people like you who come forward, because
it's real. Just
more people now,
they're out, that doesn't mean they're not out there.
Right. And, you know, I have lots of reasons why they've existed this long, and that's a whole different lecture or
different video.
you can spend an hour going over where the bones are, where the bodies are, what these things are. That's a whole different thing. But the witnesses, your testimony, I appreciate so much. I was excited to call you tonight because I know that area. And I'm like, yes, here's another great witness in this same area.
Yep.
So thank you. Thank you.
And thank you guys. Cause if I can ever, if anything else ever happens, I will reach out again, because this is important research that we need to understand, man. We need to be able to, I don't want to say live with these beings, like closely and try to, domesticate them or whatever it may be, but we need to protect them. If they are going to be, they're getting more curious now because we're logging more, we're taking their land, they're moving more, they're trying to find other places to move to, and I believe that's part of the reason why I had both of those experiences.
Yes, and I think I mentioned the gentleman that had the game camera photos. They logged clear cut. I mean, they wiped everything out behind his house, which then again, they got to move. So I really want to protect their habitat. They're not trying to hurt.
Absolutely.
They're not trying to hurt us. There's some reports out there. Yes. I'm not going to say everyone's nice.
Well, and it's just like humans. You're going to get bad and good always. There's always aggressive and non-aggressive and passive aggressive or whatever it may be.
I agree that different personalities, different temperaments, you catch one on a bad day. But generally speaking, just like your encounters, the one at your house, when you walked outside, it could have killed your dogs.
Yep.
It could have killed you.
Ripped me apart.
They don't want to do that. They're just curious. They kind of want to watch, and I want to respect them as well. So
same here. And you guys are doing important work. It's not just a joke. It's very real research, and we need to understand these things, and that's a part of our nature, is to be curious about those things and question it.
And your testimony, I mentioned this a lot. We don't have a lot of pictures or video of these creatures.
Right.
The witnesses tell us what they look like, how they behave, where they live. So your testimony is crucial to our research.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm happy to help, and I'm also happy for the opportunity. Thank you very much for calling me. I really do appreciate it, and it's been a long time coming, and I really need to get this out there to the people and to you guys, more importantly.
Yeah. Well, I thank you again, and keep in touch. Anything else happens, you've got my phone number, and
absolutely.
Hopefully we'll get this published next week, and you'll see it.
Most definitely. I'll be keeping an eye out, because I've got a couple of my friends that watch your channel too, and I didn't tell them anything. I told a couple of people that you were calling me, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so awesome!" And I said, "Yeah, man, I'm really excited to kind of get this out of there and share this with the public more, because, like I said before, and I could say this till I'm blue in the face, we have to understand this. There's got to be an answer to this, and we will find it one day, just maybe not today."
I agree. I hope before we die in our lifetime, we could say, "We told you so."
Yep. And let those other trolls, let them find out for themselves. And see, and that's another thing. They can probably sense humanity. They sense the curiosity and sense people in a way, and they people watch just like us. So, you got a closed-minded person that doesn't pay attention to little things. They may not show themselves to them.
Right. I agree. They can sense that.
Yep.
Well, also, Colton, thank you again so much.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for the call, and I'll look forward to seeing the video.
All right. You have a good night.
You too, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.